Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid Butt. It is the 9th of February 2022. These are the stories that we will be discussing during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the responsibility that is on the Afghan Taliban and the current government that is in Afghanistan as far as eliminating all elements of extremism and terrorism is concerned. This is what the Afghan Taliban's government has pledged, that it will not let its soil be used against the neighboring countries, and that includes Pakistan. Nevertheless, there has been a report that has been made by a team of UN monitors that talks about Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan that still has about 3,000 to 5,000 fighters in Afghanistan. How can all of this element of terrorism be controlled in the current circumstances and the geostrategic and geopolitical atmosphere? This is going to be our first segment of the day. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, pertains to India and of course the way the current government of the BJP is moving towards the plight of minorities as far as India is concerned, and Narendra Modi's direction in moving India towards a path to genocide, whether it be Genocide Watch that has talked about it, whether it has been other institutions and organizations that have published reports on it as far as India's attitude towards its minorities, India's racist and belligerent attitude towards other segments of the society. And whenever somebody tries to raise a voice, the way these voices are muted time and again is making the world understand that India is no longer the shining country that it specifies itself to be, or for that matter even a democracy. This is going to be our second story. Our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab, who on Wednesday urged Indian Muslims to stand up for the protection of their fundamental rights in India. We all know what has happened as far as the hijab is concerned in certain education institutions. Now even Indian universities and colleges are not allowing the women who are of course in parda or wearing hijab to enter the educational institutions. There have been huge rallies of pro-BJP students against these girls, and in India, which has a huge minority of Muslims, a number that is even more than the Muslims in Pakistan, it is pertinent to note that this is an attitude that is consistent with the BJP's policy of differentiating between the different segments of the society and the different religions. This is going to be our third story. Our fourth story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the 5G spectrum and the government that has formed a high-powered committee to approve the 5G strategic plan and oversee the process of releasing the next generation technology and the spectrum auction. The committee is going to propose incentives and of course will release the 5G spectrum as well, which will be included in the Finance Bill 2022. At the same time, across the world there are different aspersions and connotations when it comes to the 5G spectrum. There have been rallies against this 5G spectrum as well, and there are organizations that are trying to use it to their advantage or to their disadvantage. We'll also discuss this in our last story. Let's begin, ladies and gentlemen, with our first segment, and that concerns the Afghan Taliban's responsibility as far as eliminating all scourge of terrorism from inside their country, because as per a report of the United Nations, there is a certain number of TTP extremists that are still present within Afghanistan. More in the following report.
Security landscape of region underwent tectonic shift after hasty US withdrawal from Afghanistan. After the formation of Taliban government, humanitarian crisis gripped the war-ravaged country against backdrop of crippling US sanctions. Islamabad became one of the main proponents of beleaguered Afghans on international scene, bringing global attention towards the plight of Afghans while calling for urgent financial assistance. Being cognizant of the TTP and other terror outfits taking advantage of the security vacuum in Afghanistan, Pakistan incessantly urged interim Taliban government to rein in destabilizing forces. TTP leadership is based in Afghanistan, and after lighting ascendance to power in August 15th, Afghan Taliban set free hundreds of TTP terrorists terrorists, including some prominent leaders incarcerated in Afghan jails. Lending credence to Pakistan's strategic concerns, the 29th report of UN Analytical Support and Sanctions Monitoring Team revealed that the proscribed group TTP still has between 3,000 and 5,000 fighters in Afghanistan. Despite public pledges to never allow use of Afghan soil to become safe haven for terrorists, TTP is conducting terror activities from Afghan soil with impunity, and resurgence of terror attacks on Pakistani security forces exhibit alarming situation. As interim Afghan government seeks recognition and urging to lift sanctions, it's time to take concrete steps against terror outfits to garner credibility in international community.
Now, to discuss this important matter, we've been joined by Brigadier retired Saad Mohammed Saab. He's a senior analyst. Brigadier Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Brigadier Saab, when you see reports such as what we will be talking about during the course of this segment and previous reports as well, how do you make up for the security paradigm of Afghanistan?
It has been unfortunate that throughout its history, since 1947, Pakistan has tried to help Afghanistan in every way possible. However, despite the different governments ruling in Afghanistan, Pakistan's goodwill and Pakistan's, attempt relations with Afghanistan have been, somehow not going as planned. And this recent upsurge in the terrorist activities from across the border, the recent one being in Kurram Agency, in former Kurram Agency, now Kurram district, in which fire from across the Durand line caused casualties in Pakistan, resulting in the soldiers of the Pakistan security forces. Pakistan, Afghans, and particularly Taliban, their families live here. Some of them have been living here during the occupation by NATO and the United States. But despite that, after the installation of the government on the 15th of August, when they captured Kabul, the terrorist activities by the TTP against Pakistan have been on the rise, and the recent spike is very alarming, and this is unacceptable. The Afghan Taliban had made a pledge at Doha during their agreement with states that they will not allow the soil of Afghanistan to be used by terrorist activities. Unfortunately, that pledge has not been honored. Particularly, it is very sad that a friendly country like Pakistan has become a target.
Brigadier Saab, we understand that the Doha Agreement is not being followed in its true spirit, and we understand that Pakistan is the unlikely and of course the likely first target of such extremism because of the non-commitment as far as the Doha Agreement is concerned. What do you foresee, and why are the reasons? What are the reasons in your point of view? There are different questions that emanate from different quarters. Some say that the Afghan government cannot control properly, wants certain time to control such segments. Others say that they are in cohorts with them. What is the reality of all of this?
The Afghan Taliban feel that, that when the United States came into Afghanistan, Pakistan provided bases to them, and Pakistan provided bases. They provided lines of communication both through the Pakistani airspace and Pakistan ground lines of communication to help topple the Taliban and sustain the US-NATO occupation of Afghanistan. On the other hand, the TTP and fought for them also in some cases and provided some troops to the Afghan Taliban during their resistance against the US and NATO occupation in Afghanistan. The other is that during all these years, there has been a heavy anti-Pakistan propaganda in Afghanistan. Most of it resting on the irredentist claims of that the Durand line is not a legitimate border with Afghanistan. It's on Pakistani territory. Now, with that when there is lack of deliverance on part of the Taliban. They have not been able to deliver to the Afghan. And the situation, especially the humanitarian situation, is getting from bad to worse, and it may lead to a catastrophe. Also, the security situation is also not very good. Now, to cover this up, they bring up this sub-nationalism, the Pashtun nationalism within Afghanistan, which has been the overriding factor of the Afghan foreign policy all through these 73, 44 that Pakistan has come into existence. So they play on the sentiments of the people to divert the attention of the people. They bring up issues like the Durand Line or Pakistan interfering in their internal affairs. So these are some of the reasons that the Afghan Taliban are following this governments had been doing, whether they were communist or whether they were, monarchy or whether they were Republican.
But Brigadier Saab, with due respect, the current government of the Afghan Taliban had pledged also to its neighborly countries that there will be no trickling down of extremism or terrorist elements within the countries. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case when it comes to Pakistan. China has already talked about ETIM with the Afghan government, and that seems to hold true to some extent. Why can't it hold true as far as the TTP and Pakistan is concerned? Is there a certain tilt towards China? Is there a certain non-tilt toward Pakistan? Are there some other issues at play? Are there spoilers at play? What are the real reasons behind it?
There are anti-China sentiments within Afghanistan. There are huge anti-Pakistan sentiments within Afghanistan. And this is because right from 1947 onwards, the propaganda has been carried out against Pakistan. Most of it based on the nationalism, the Pashtun nationalism within Afghanistan. The other communities don't have any problem with the Durand Line or with Pakistan. It is these people, the Pashtun nationalists, which have created problem, and they have been part of every government. So that is one of that, Pakistan becomes a scapegoat for their problems. And China being a power to be and being an easy scapegoat, so they will target Pakistan. That becomes an easier one to handle.
All right.
The Taliban,
also, there have been
Pakistan, they were
talks
staying
between
here in Pakistan.
There's a certain lag in communication, Brigadier Saab, with due apologies, due to which we can't hear ourselves in real time. Nevertheless, Brigadier Saab, when it comes to the TTP, some time back we were also trying to hold negotiations with them, but of course they fell flat because of the non-commitment from the TTP side. What now? How can Pakistan tackle or control this element of extremism and terrorism?
Talking to the Taliban, I think, will never succeed. They are a terrorist organization. They are anti-Pakistan. They are against the way of life here in Pakistan. They are against the constitution of Pakistan. And and they use terror as an instrument to gain their objectives. So there should be no talking to, and there should be no compromise on such matters, which are against the policies, the known policies, the external policies, or the internal policies of Pakistan. Nobody should dictate to Pakistan through the barrel of the gun. So that we should not accept. On the other hand, how to tackle this? We need to do some plain talking and no apologetic, approach. Some of us would like to do that. We come up with these excuses that they don't have control over their territory or they don't. Then they should say so. At least they should condemn the terrorist attacks in Pakistan. They have not said a word about that. Killing innocent Pakistanis or attacking the security forces from a neighboring country is an act of war. So the least they can do is say that they have control over them and also condemn such activities. And I don't believe that they don't have control over the territory. Had they issued an order, there will be no terrorist activity against Pakistan. I don't think so. The TTP would have had the courage sitting on their soil to come and kill innocent people across the border. We have certain leverage, and we must talk to the National Security Advisor. Had recently been to Kabul, and some talks must have been on the subject itself. We need to do some plain talking. Afghanistan needs recognition. And Pakistan is one country that can help them gain recognition. But if they start attacking Pakistan and they start creating difficulties for Pakistan, then I don't think so the world will be ready to recognize them. If Pakistan comes out and says that, it's a terrorist-based country, there are a lot of terrorists sitting there and they're attacking Pakistan. So if Pakistan is not safe, the world considers itself safe from the terrorists which are sitting in Pakistan, and it becomes again, a center for terrorists and world terrorists who would move there and threaten others. So we need to talk to the Taliban. We need to make to them plain to them the terrorist activities of Pakistan will invite a reaction from us, which could be diplomatic.
Don't you feel, Brigadier Saab, that if the aid that needs to come to Afghanistan at the earliest because of the current crisis that the country is embroiled in, if it does not come in time, if it does not come to the people in due time, that it will lead to more such elements gaining strength?
That is, there is a danger of that. But then for the rule, it is for the rulers in Afghanistan to decide, of Afghanistan to ask their rulers as to why are they, following such disastrous policies. They have just come here. They need recognition. They need foreign aid. They need food people. They need medical, aid to look after their population, which is facing a terrible humanitarian crisis. Now, the most worried people should be the people sitting at the helm in Kabul. But Pakistan can only provide help. But it cannot, provide help, continue providing help if the country, supports terror activities against Pakistan. Then it becomes very difficult for Pakistan. The public opinion in Pakistan will rise up at the government of Pakistan as to why are we providing aid to a country uses terror as an instrument to gain its policy objectives.
Brigadier Saab, Moeed Yusuf Saab was there in Afghanistan very recently as well, and I think the message got across also. They discuss a whole gamut of important issues that pertain to both Afghanistan and Pakistan. At the same time, there is also a lot of pressure from the West on Afghanistan to follow up on the human rights situation or the rights of the women in the country. Do you think, in your point of view, sir, is all of this also linked to this current state of terrorism, or is this a totally different affair?
Well, I think this is not related to that. But, the ideology which they follow, they have been using themselves terror as an instrument. And so they're on that angle. And since the TTP has been an ally in their resistance against the NATO and in Afghanistan, therefore they are allies. And they turn a blind eye to their activities against Pakistan. When Pakistan protests, all they do is that, we can arrange for you to have talks with them, but it's very difficult for us to restrain them. They come up with such excuses, which are unacceptable. Pakistan is excuse that it's an internal affair of Pakistan and Pakistan should talk to them. But sitting on their soil carrying out terrorist activities, it would have been Pakistan's internal problem. Had they been sitting on Pakistani soil, then it was Pakistan's internal problem. Afghans had nothing to do. Sit on their soil and they attack Pakistan, then it is not an internal affair of Pakistan. It is a terrorist activity from another country against Pakistan.
Now, sir, when it comes to the TTP or when it comes to the BLA, there are these two elements that are trying to create a very unsavory environment or havoc, let's put it that way, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and in Balochistan. Now we have, of course, a national security plan that has been put into place. We have also the National Action Plan that is there since 2014. And our armed forces are quite vigilant. They have fought 3 very important wars against these terrorist and extremist elements. Do you feel, sir, in your point of view, very candidly, are we gearing up for another small exercise in that domain?
It appears to be going on that trajectory. snip this evil in the bud. There are some portions of the Durand Line which have not been fetched thus far. That must be so that the cross-border movement of these terrorists is stopped. There's the same activity going on the Pakistan-Iran border. Their defense also has started, and we need to complete it in an earlier time frame, so that from that point of view of cross-border movement by terrorists Pakistan becomes more secure. The security forces to now realize that we might be getting to another phase of terrorist activities that previously saw from 2008 onwards to 2014 and 15. And we fought a long war. This time again, our enemies are planning it that way. The situation in Pakistan unstable. But I think the security forces of Pakistan are vigilant. The people of Pakistan are behind their security forces. And there will be here and there coming. But I don't foresee any major instability coming in Pakistan because of the terrorist activities against Pakistan. The terrorists are mistaken. They can defeat the Pakistan army, or they can create mayhem in Pakistan, as you said. There will be problems. I'm not saying there will not be problems, but we will overcome them. That's not an issue.
All right. Thank you very much, sir, to have joined us. Brigadier Saad Mohammed Saab, senior analyst, joining us and talking to us about the increase in terrorist incidents in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, the elements behind it, and of course, the report that has recently been released by a team of United Nations monitors that talks about the number of fighters from the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan that are still present in the Afghan territory. Let's see what the coming days have as far as these elements are concerned, and how the Afghan Taliban and the Afghan government is going to deal with them. Let's come to our second story, ladies and gentlemen, that concerns how Narendra Modi's path is leading India towards genocide. Genocide Watch has talked about it. The minorities are living in a very uncertain era for the first time since India became independent. This is a new report, apart from the many different reports that have come out from Genocide Watch, from Amnesty International, from United Nations Human Rights Commission. This is another report that has come from the New York Times that talks about the same plight. More in the following report.
Multiple episodes of violence, harassment, and hate speech against minorities in India vividly indicate that the self-styled democracy is hurtling towards genocide violence under state patronage of Hindu nationalist government. The forces that shape ideology of Modi's RSS regime had slowly risen to dominate Indian politics. According to a latest report published by New York Times, violent anti-Muslim rhetoric has reached a dangerous new pitch in India while the government looks away. Narendra Modi's silence is an endorsement of calls for Muslim genocide in India. Right groups and local activists are warning they fear that a singular event could ignite widespread violence that would be difficult to contain. As reports further warns that the hate speech is stoking communal tensions in India, where small triggers have incited mass death tragedies. Earlier, President of Genocide Watch, Dr. Gregory Stanton, during a congressional briefing, has sounded alarm over escalating extremism in India triggered by Hindutva ideology and warned that genocide could very well happen in India. The timeline of anti-Muslim events and hate speech is long, and much of it receives a coverage inside India. Recently, hate-monger chief priest Yati Narsingh Anand, and an outspoken supporter of far-right nationalist who also heads Hindu monastery, is granted bail by courts, allegedly in the case of hate speech and genocidal calls against Muslim in Uttar Pradesh state. Modi regime has reduced India to a land of intolerance, thriving in the cradle of violence where hardliner RSS reigns state apparatus.
I'll talk further about this report and the current state of our not-so-friendly neighbor India. We've been joined by Raja Qaiser Ahmed, who is a foreign affairs expert. Raja Qaiser, first of all, thank you very much to have joined our show after a small hiatus. We hope you are fine. Secondly, Raja Qaiser, let's come to the imminent story very quickly. How do you feel about all of these reports coming out and the world turning a blind eye to it?
Well, thank you, Umar Khalid, but it's indeed a pleasure to be back in your show, as you said, after a long hiatus. So, indeed, things they are taking a very appalling turn in India. Things they are on their down slump, and this is not what you may call it as regression. This is not transgression either. This is an evolution, and this is an evolution for what India always wanted to be. This is something, the Hindu Rashtra or something which they always
But Raja
wanted to
Kaisar,
evoke.
I'd like to stop you there. Evolution is a very cool or a nice word to put for where India is going. In fact, would we really call it an evolution or a
Yeah,
devolution?
no, my point, Umar Khalid Bhatt, is that India always wanted to be a Hindu Rashtra. You
True.
know, their a little sojourn with secularism, which they have had for a very little period of time, that was not the reality. India always had these tenets and underpinnings of Hindu nationalism. They always wanted Hindu supremacy. They always wanted Hindu majoritarianism to prevail. These Congress ideals of inclusivity, composite culture, and coexistence, they were, proved to be merely political rhetoric. Now India is returning to its originality. This is what India
Raja Kaisar, I
always
have a
wanted to be.
question here. I have a question here, Raja Kaisar. You say that India is coming back to reality, and whatever the Congress and the other opposition parties were going towards was more or less fiction in the minds of a certain section of the Indian society. Do you really feel that is true? Do you feel that the majority of Indians have always had this mentality hidden and now it has come to the forefront?
Yes, absolutely. And I would like to quote Arundhati Roy over here, who says that still majority of the Indians, they are living in the 20th century. They could not accede to the ideals of the 21st century. They are still living in that delusional world of Hindu majority, Vedic era, and all the mythological beliefs which sound very absurd. So you see that their prime minister repeatedly on certain very illustrious forums has spoken something which was far away from rationality, scientific reasoning, which was far away from even logic. But this is what is an inward looking approach, and India is in a kind of a cul-de-sac. They are into kind of that tunnel vision in which they are envisaging their own evolution, and this is where this trajectory is heading India to a very narrow, myopic, and parochial polity, where all the minorities, not particularly Muslims, but all the minorities are at the receiving end, because this madness, it knows no boundaries, it knows no bounds. So that is why you see that Sikhs, Dalits, Christians, for that matter, Muslims at the helm of the affairs, they all are suffering, and their persecution, it goes unabated. What is happening to Muslims in Kashmir? And very recently, you see this event of Karnataka. Where a Muslim hijab wearing woman, she has been tormented, and she has been vandalized by a Hindu mob and Hindu crowd. It is symptomatic of the fact, it is
And
symptomatic of the
educational
tragedy
institutions
which
not
India is heading.
allowing women wearing burqa or hijab to enter when everybody knows that Muslims have been part of India since, not since now, since centuries. I don't understand why the change of heart now and why this change in polity now. Isn't it moving towards self-destruction, India, if it continues in the same vein? Does it not understand what direction it is taking?
Absolutely, because you see that Muslims, they are around 200 million people. They constitute a larger chunk of their population. And along with this, then there are, as I said, Sikh minorities, there are
Of
Dalits, there
course.
are Christian minorities. All of these, they constitute a larger mosaic of the society.
Then there
If
are the
Indians, they
different castes
constitute
as well, the way they also treat the Dalits. Let's not forget
the
that.
Dalits, then other backward castes. So these casual castes, the way they are treating them, and this trajectory is leading India to an internal self implosion. You see that India, it never had existed as single territorial coherent unit. They are perhaps delusional of the fact that what is happening, this consternation in their northeast states, then this Naxalite movement in Bihar, then this Kashmir's freedom movement, then this Khalistan freedom movement. all of these things, they might culminate and they might trigger India to a point where India might it lead to a breakdown of India. It can lead to a bifurcation where
But
India
has
might
that been the
change
intention
into
of the
many other
BJP,
countries.
to create only one part of India that should remain Hindu and the rest they'll leave it to their devices? I mean, what does the BJP government want, in fact? I mean, I don't understand.
They want all other non-Hindus to be subservient to Hindus. They want all other non-Hindus to be B-class citizens of India. They want Hindu majoritarianism to prevail. They want Hindu nationalist ethos to rule India. They want all of these people to be relegated into kind of, I mean, that is actually the classic model of the fascist ideology. Okay, you believe, like Germans, they used to believe that rest of the world, Germans are the Aryans and the rest of the people, they are not, they are subhumans. So they want to be treated like that. This is what this fascist ideology, this proto-fascist regime in New Delhi, it is unleashing these egregious uh, atrocities upon their own minorities, and that is how they are treating them. And it is nothing short of a neo-fascism which is right now prevalent in India. And Indians, they are perhaps playing with the fire because they don't know the fact that the kind of diversity, the kind of this heterogeneity which they have uh, at their home, if this composite culture or this coexistence over which this India was elicited, if it gets upset, so India won't be able to stand like as it is today. It might lead to an
True.
internal
True.
breakdown. It might lead to an internal
End
implosion.
of pluralism in India. An India that calls itself shining India is shining no more. When you talk of all of these atrocities towards the minorities, wouldn't the bubble burst at one time? Won't there be a lashback as far as the way these minorities are being persecuted? Won't they lash back? I will revert to what Nasiruddin Shah, a very prominent Indian actor, said, and I quote, "If it comes to the crunch, we Muslims will fight back. If it comes to that ethnic cleansing, we will. We are defending our homes, our family, our children." That is a very strong statement, and I'm sure others will follow.
Indeed, you see that you cannot push all your minorities back to the wall. And Muslims, as I said, that they are at the helm of the affairs because they are at the receiving end as the largest minority. So this is definitely on point argument that Muslims will retaliate, and this will further lead to an internal chaos. So this internal instability and this precarity would definitely have very catastrophic impinging for India. And if Indians, they do not continue to realize that the way they are trying to please Brahmanic elite right now in India, this Brahmanic ethos, and the way they by making a collusion and colluding with the big business corporates, and creating a self-orchestrated reality, they cannot be fool and delude everyone. So definitely you see that this is the first modern instance where the notion of ethnicity had been changed from civic to ethnic identity. Under this CAA, they changed the notion of identity. Identity in the modern nation state system is a civic construct. Indians, they change into an ethnic construct. And what is, Umar Khalid, but even more paradoxical, you see that the Muslims in India, they are asking and claiming themselves to be Indians, and Indians are asking them to prove their identity that they are Indians. They are not ready to accept them as Indians. Whereas Kashmiri Muslims, they are ready, or they are adamant not identifying themselves as Indians, whereas Indians are imposing an identity over them forcefully that no, you are Indians. So you see that what can be even more dichotomy of the situation, like as it stands of now.
Raja Kaisar Ahmed, also, when it comes to this current situation in India as far as the minorities are concerned, will there be any political repercussions as far as the future of the BJP is concerned? I'm hearing a lot of reports from India that even those people who had voted for the BJP are having second thoughts for the next elections, although the second time BJP came into power with an even larger mandate.
Absolutely, but Umar Khalid, but we should not be more concerned about BJP. We should be concerned about Hindu nationalism. That now
True.
stands as a social and political reality in India. If it will not be BJP, it will be likes of BJP. If it will not be Shiv Sena, it will be likes of Shiv Sena. You see that Indian National Congress, which was the emblemizer of the plurality and the coexistence and secularism, they did not use word secularism for even a single instance in their entire electoral campaign of 2019's elections. So that's the level of uh, Hindu nationalism sweeping across the ranks and files of India. So you see that even party like Congress is under the pressure of BJP. So you expect this Hindutva is now to stay there for long, because it is something which is the reflection of their internal society. It even synchronizes with their ruling priorities. It even synergizes with their elite and their mindset. So that's why this Hindu nationalism is now an undeniable reality. We'll have to live with that. And if it will not be BJP, it will be even more vitriolic and more ferocious form of any Hindu nationalism, any other strand which would be even more repugnant and which would be even more pungent.
All right, Raja Qaiser Ahmed, if I properly understand what you've just told me, it's that even those parties that were previously secular are now no longer following the same path that they were before because of the influence of this Hindu nationalism that is currently prevailing over all of India. Now, I would refer, you were talking of Congress, I'd like to revert to what Rahul Gandhi Sahab said at the Lok Sabha very recently, and he said that because of the BJP government's policy, India stands isolated. Now, I mean, isolation is a very strong word. Do you feel in the current context of the way this Hindu nationalism is sweeping India, that India will further be isolated, or do you feel that there will be certain countries in the West that will continue to support India no matter what?
It will be, or it might be an unpopular opinion, but India does not stand isolated, because India, it enjoys tremendous diplomatic, economic, and political clout across the world in the international community. Because the niceties of the international politics, they are more driven by economy nowadays. It is economic stupid which rules the entire world. So India, it happens to house the largest consumerist economy. So, and then it is the democratic franchise. Definitely India has made a downward trajectory in their democracy index, but still it is a democratic franchise.
True.
So for the West, it becomes an obvious choice. So a country which is having booming and thriving economy, and then it has a democratic franchise. So they always take it in the binary of India versus China. So they will never stand by China, because to them China is anti-democratic and India is democratic. So definitely, if you ask the Western intelligentsia, they would say that indeed there are some problems with India, but still India is far better than its neighbors. So that's the argument. So when they bracket it in this kind of binary, it means that there won't be much pressure on India from the international community, as far as their this diplomatic and economic clout, it stands intact. And
In the face of such hollow
secondly,
argumentation, as you've just pointed out, what stands as far as the future of this region is concerned in the current context of this Hindu nationalism? Are other countries going to be affected by it?
indeed, the region, it's the victim of this policy. India is intimidating and bullying its neighbors. You see that their act of entering into Pakistan's mainland, this Balakot, was the naked aggression. And the way India, it intimidates and bullies its immediate neighbors like Bhutan, like Nepal. So this is something which is very unprecedented and very uncharacteristic. So that's why and then this might lead to have a spillover, because you see that India is constantly locking its horns with China. It has problems with Pakistan. It has problems with its lesser neighbors as well. So these it's less powerful neighbors as well. So it has problems with Myanmar as well. So definitely all the countries cumulatively might not have only all the problems altogether. It's India which has its revisionist aims, and they want to alter the realities of the region. So this upset in the regional balance of power would definitely implicate the international balance of power, and the way America is adamant in raising India as a counterweight to China through their Indo-Pacific strategy. So that would again would have definitely implications for the regional peace and for the international peace.
I totally understand and I totally agree with you as far as the implications on regional peace, regional security are concerned. This whole Hindu nationalism is not only enveloping the entire of India, but soon it is going to have immense repercussions for India firsthand because of the divisions within the society and the religions that are going to happen. We talk about the clash of civilization, the clash of cultures, the clash of religion. I think we are seeing this in fact happening right in front of our eyes in our not so friendly neighbor India. Thank you very much, Raja Qaiser Ahmed Saab, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important report that has been compiled by the New York Times. And of course, this follows a huge spate of reports that have come in the last few years as far as the current state of the minorities within India is concerned. Now, coming to minorities and India, our next story concerns India as well. Now, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi Saab on Wednesday urged Indian Muslims to stand up for the protection of their fundamental rights in India. Now, what happened in a statement that was released recently, the minister said that the persecution campaign against Muslims in the neighboring country will not stop if the Muslim community remained silent. He also condemned the banning of the hijab at the educational institutions in Karnataka in India. And of course, this is a huge development as far as the Muslim community that is, of course, a huge minority within India are not being allowed to follow their due rights. And this is a part of a country that calls itself the largest democracy. This is a part of a country that considers itself to be pluralistic, that of course respects quote unquote all different religions and sects. This is the video that you are seeing, in fact, as to how they treat and how they are now treating this mob, this unruly mob of Hindu nationalists, and how they are trying to convert and completely put a stain on the current state of environment as far as India is concerned. Not only politics, but also educational institutions are now not left behind as far as tainting of the current minority by this majority of Hindus is concerned. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let's come to our last story. And this last story concerns 5G spectrum. And of course, 5G and how it is slowly and steadily becoming the new trend across the world. Now, the Ministry of Information Technology and Telecommunication in Pakistan has constituted an advisory committee for 5G planning in Pakistan to define a roadmap and finalize recommendations for 5G technology readiness in Pakistan. This committee is going to develop strategic plan and roadmap for 5G technology in Pakistan with the formulation of working groups for 5G spectrum management. And of course, this is going to be included in the Finance Bill 2022. At the same time, on the one hand, we see 5G technology that is going to change the entire world with the rapidity of what it stands for. We are going to have access to data, to videos at such a rapid pace as we've never seen before, a huge leap from 4G. On the other hand, there are countries across the world that are putting a bad name and putting the whole 5G into a controversial arena, whether it be, we've seen the whole issue with the 5G and Canon that happened in Ottawa in Canada, whether it be other countries that say that 5G is a technology that should not be implemented. There are questions, there are positives, there are negatives. The whole world needs to move forward. It needs to move forward within a neutral and a balanced space. And for that, all the parties, pro and against, need to come together and formulate a joint strategy so that 5G could become a thing of the present and not the future. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new story segments and of course issues that concern you, us and Pakistan. Till then, as I always end my show with, try to be very careful with the pandemic. We need to get ourselves vaccinated, boosted if necessary, and follow the SOPs. This is how we can prevent our country from getting more cases of COVID-19. Allah Hafiz, see you tomorrow.